You're listening to Arin It Out, a podcast that inspires everyday people to lead with purpose in their careers, communities, and callings. I'm Arin Patterson, TEDx speaker, leadership strategist, and culture architect. I'm passionate about helping people discover their strengths, develop their skills, and do meaningful and fulfilling work. Through honest conversations and real reflections, we'll explore what it truly takes to lead well, not just in the work that you do, but in who you become. Because it's not about the title you wear, it's about the stretch, the setbacks, and the silent wins along the way. Are you ready to grow, lead, and leave your mark? If so, let's begin. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Arin It Out. I'm your host, Arin Patterson, and today's episode, episode 7, is entitled Dare to Lead. Now, leadership is often defined in a lot of different ways, and I'm actually looking forward to the last episode of this season because we're going to go back to just a foundational definition of leadership. But one definition that I love comes from Brené Brown's book, Dare to Lead. She says a leader is anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes and has the courage to develop that potential. Let me say that again because I know that's a mouthful. Her definition of leadership is this: a leader is anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes and has the courage to develop that potential. Now, this resonates with me so much because it mirrors what I've always believed about leadership, that it's not about titles, but it is about being courageous, it is about being clear, and it is about caring for people. So today, I want to talk about what it really means to dare to lead and how courage, values, and resilience all play a part. Now, if you recall a few episodes ago, I gave you my leadership toolkit. And this is the very first book that I mentioned that is in my leadership toolkit. And I also told you all that I love Brené Brown. I absolutely love her work. She had a Netflix special not too long ago entitled A Call to Courage. And it's one of those things that you can go back and watch over and over again, and it will just re-inspire you to become the best that you can be. And also, when you step into my office, right at the office entryway, there's a small, cute little table with a fake plant. One of my coworkers says she wants me to get a real plant there, but I don't do real plants. And the book is right there on a little stand. And it is a daily reminder of the call to leadership, that daring to lead means so much more than having a title of director. It means so much more than making a certain amount of money. But leadership is all about people and processes and developing that potential, like Brené Brown said. So there's 3 different things I want to highlight from her book that I think will be beneficial for you all. And I encourage you, if you have not read the book, to read the book. And if you are one who prefers ebooks, she does her own ebooks and they're amazing and engaging. But let's start this. So the very first part of being someone who dares to lead, or the concept that we find in this book, is this. And these are not in any particular order. These are just things that I pulled out from the book that I felt like were really vital to this message. Here's the first part. Rumbling with vulnerability, the call to courage and the armor. Okay? Rumbling with vulnerability, and then dash, the call to courage and the armor. So here's the big idea from this. You know, courage and vulnerability, as Brené Brown talks about, they go hand in hand. You cannot have courage without vulnerability, and you cannot have vulnerability without courage. Now, leaders oftentimes wear this armor, so to speak. You know, I think about, a knight with all this huge metal thick covering for their body, and armor is for the purpose of protection. And leaders often go into their teams, they go into organizations, they go into rooms with armor on, but that armor doesn't serve the purpose in that setting that it does or would need to serve in a setting like someone who's fighting for their life. Leaders often protect themselves with armor like perfectionism, like cynicism, or emotional distance. Armor feels safe, but it blocks connection and trust. Armor feels safe, but it blocks connection and trust. And I remember when I was back in the classroom, and I've said over and over again that, my early days being a middle school teacher, I felt like really kind of laid the groundwork for what leadership should look like in my life. And, as a young teacher, I started teaching when I was 22 years old. And I think a lot of times you come into that setting and you're like, okay, I'm the leader in this space and I need to make sure that the people respect me. I need to make sure that they like me. I need to make sure that I'm all these things, all of our preconceptions about what leaders should be like. And I believe a lot of us walk into spaces at work, um, in the community, and we kind of approach it with this, I should be this. And I would say that's kind of like our armor in a sense. But one thing that I recognized very quickly in my leadership, in my teaching, and I learned this from the classroom, was that you have to take the armor off. That it's very hard for people to connect with you. It's very hard for people to trust you if you're always in this guarded space. And that armor guards us, but not from danger. It guards us from connection. And one of the goals of leading well and leading effectively, I believe, is to connect with the people that you lead. And as I was in the classroom, one of the things that I found necessary to display or to share with my students was that I didn't have all of the answers. Yes, I'm standing up here. I am Miss Patterson. I'm teaching you, and I have a lot of things to share with you, but I don't know everything. And there's something that you listening here today could say is your armor. That maybe for you it's not this sense of needing to know it all, but maybe it's your sense of wanting to be perfect in everything that you do. That you're so scared to make a mistake that you stay up late, you wake up early, you're constantly involved in your job, you're constantly in this place of trying to be the absolute best, but almost to your detriment. Or maybe you find yourself just emotionally distant. You're in a place where you say, I'm the boss and I can't let these people see my feelings. I can't show any emotion. And you really cut yourself off from being able to connect fully with the people that you serve. So a practical takeaway for this conversation about um rumbling with vulnerability, as Brené Brown calls it. Um and and again, this is a very high level overview of some of the things she talks about in this book, because there's no way in this podcast I could share all the specifics. But one takeaway is this: that vulnerability doesn't mean weakness. It means being willing to have hard conversations and not pretending to know it all. Can I say that again for you? Vulnerability does not mean weakness. Vulnerability does not mean weakness. It means being willing to have hard conversations and not pretending to know it all. I could end the podcast right here and you could sit with that information for the next week, and I guarantee your leadership would be better if you thought about what that looked like in your own life. Here's the second thing that I want to highlight from Brené Brown's Dare to Lead, is the importance of living into your values. The importance of living into your values. So here's the big idea with this: leadership without values is shallow. Real leaders align their actions with their core beliefs, even when it's uncomfortable. Now, this is not in my notes, but this is something I've been having a conversation with a few friends about over the last couple of weeks. I feel like it's come up, and I need to go back. And so I'm going to say this, and I need to fact check myself on this. But if I recall correctly, there's a language, I want to say it's Hebrew, that in the Hebrew language, there is no difference between what you believe and what you do, that those two words mean the same thing. And in the English language, we talk about, I believe this about life, I believe this. And then on the other hand, what we do, or the actions that we take, or the behaviors that we practice, don't always align with the things we say we believe. And leaders understand the importance of aligning those two things, that your actions have to be aligned with your beliefs, your values, even when it's uncomfortable. So for me, I have three core values. These are my top three core values that I live by. I live by this in my personal life. I live by this in my leadership. And there's not an area of my life that I would like to think there's not an area of my life where these are misaligned with what I believe and what I do. My first core value is this: integrity. Integrity for me is a compass. It's doing the right thing even when it's hard. And I found myself in positions where I could choose to do what felt like was best, but knew in my heart that I can't do that thing because it doesn't represent who I am. And so I've found myself in positions where I've had to make hard decisions, and I've had to really lean into this core value and remind myself that I make decisions based on who I am, and integrity, and a person of integrity is who I am. My second core value is relationships. Relationships are important. Relationships are my motivation, and great leadership is all about people. So relationships for me in my personal life are valuable. Relationships in my work life are valuable. I think I've mentioned on the podcast before that currently my four direct reports are all men, and I enjoy my team. I enjoy the gentlemen that I work with, and every single one of them, I could tell you things about who they are. I could tell you things about their background. I could tell you things about the direction that they want their careers to go, or what they feel like is next for them, because relationships matter. And we were sitting in our bi-weekly meeting last week, and I just said to them, we've only been working, all five of us, so myself plus the four of them, we've only been working together for the last just over a year, because the last person joined the team about a year ago. But one thing I told them is I'm so glad about where we are. And I feel like the better we get to know each other, the better we're going to work together. And we're just going to just keep going up. But I'm so pleased with where we are as a team. And I really believe that the reason that we're where we are is because of my desire as a leader to build relationships. And that's to build relationships with each of them individually, to help them build relationships with each other. And I can't take full credit for that. I do think there's a piece of me that, leans into that. But there's a bigger culture at work in the organization that I work at. Every major job that I have worked, I've selected because of my ability to build relationships. One of the things I mentioned when I went to college and decided to change my major was that, you know, I remember thinking, if I become a dentist, how will I have time to connect with my patients? Patients that I may see once a year, at best twice a year. How can I connect with people that I only see two times in 365 days? And that was a huge driving force to me changing my major. And I knew that if I switched to education, that would give me a chance to connect not only with children, but with parents. And I knew that I would at minimum be able to see most of those children and parents 180 days of the year, which is significant. A significant amount of time. And relationships were a huge driving factor in me becoming an educator when I did. Relationships were a huge driving factor in me switching to the nonprofit sector. Relationships were a huge reason why I decided to do even the work that I'm doing today. And relationships go back to being a core value for me. And as it relates to leadership, I think about these core values and what they mean for not only who I am, but how I do my work. And I'm able to stand in this place where what I believe uh is in alignment with what I do. What I believe is in alignment with what I do. And I think about, you know, other jobs that I've had, and why it's so important for me to not only know my values, but to live my values. And I recall being at a conference, maybe not this past summer, but the summer before last. And one of the activities they had us do was this activity of really understanding what your core values are. And this was an exercise that was rather easy for me. I didn't have to think about it much because this is something I have given so much thought to in previous years. And I always think about, what is important for me. And my third core value is growth, learning, development, however you want to phrase it, is having the ability to grow, learn, and develop. For me, continuing to learn, continuing to put myself in a position to learn is of utmost importance to me. I don't believe that I should be at an organization or involved in a work setting that does not challenge me to grow, that does not push me to development. This is something that is a core value. And I want to encourage you today to determine what your core values are. For me, it's very simple. It's integrity, it's relationships, and it's growth and development. Those are the core values that wherever I go, whatever jobs that I take, whatever opportunities I accept, that I have to have these things in alignment. But I encourage you today to identify your top 3 core values and ask yourself, how do I operationalize these at work every single day? Like, how do I put these into motion in the work that I'm doing right now? Because your core values are what drive you. And so if you find yourself, if you're a relationship person like me, and you're in a job that does not allow you to lean into relationships, I guarantee you will not be you're living your best life, if I can say that. And so it's so important to lean into your values, live into your values, as Brené Brown talks about in Dare to Lead. And the third thing is this: learning to rise. Learning to rise. Here's the big idea. If you're brave enough, often enough, you will fail. Resilient leaders don't avoid failure, they rise stronger because of it. If you're brave enough, often enough, you will fail. Resilient leaders don't Resilient leaders don't avoid failure, they rise stronger because of it. Now, I haven't fully shared all of this with you all, and I do believe I have an episode planned in season 2 for me to really go into detail with this and some of the lessons that I learned. But I've shared with you all that, I left education. I didn't really have a plan in place. I just knew it was time for me to move on. I personality wise, I didn't really feel the necessity to have it all figured out completely. But I knew it was time to move on. And once I left the classroom, I really was like, what should I be doing? And I had a few opportunities that I could have leaned into. And there are some things that I tried over the course of that next year. And during that time, it was an amazing learning opportunity. But that doesn't mean that it was easy. And the year after I left the classroom, y'all, I made about, if I recall correctly, about $17,000. Yes, you heard me correctly. This is grown adult, had been grown for a long time, had been paying my own bills for a long time. And the year after I make the biggest leap of my life to date, I was only able to make $17,000. It sounds crazy to say out loud today because I don't even know how I survived that time. But it was so humbling and it challenged me. And, on the other side of that, I really understood that, obviously no one wants to be broke, but you can always come back from that. And I learned so much. I was really forced to grow and forced to learn when you're in a tough situation like that. But these experiences, this situation, it was that experience, that specific experience, leaving the classroom, stepping out to try something new, and what I called back then failure, today I just call a learning opportunity. It was an opportunity for me to learn. It was an opportunity for me to grow. And I'm so grateful for what transpired because of my decision to step out. And here's another idea that I had, as I was just planning this episode out. And I just kept thinking about this concept of people functioning in dysfunction. And too often leaders learn to function in their dysfunction. They normalize toxic habits, burnout, or unhealthy workplaces instead of addressing them. But daring to rise means refusing to stay stuck in dysfunction. It means doing the work to grow, to change, and to heal. And what does that look like for your own life? What does that look like for your organization? How can you contribute to that if you're not in a position where you're currently a leader in terms of supervising other people? But remember, if you're listening to this podcast, you are a leader. You are a leader. But if you're not in a formal, quote unquote, leadership position, what are some things that you can do to help people rise out of this dysfunction? And what I want you to understand is that when you fail or when you don't hit the target that you thought you would, we've got to reframe failure. You know, I was having a conversation with one of my employees not that long ago, and I just talked about how I do not fail. I learn, I grow. You know, those are the options. I'm learning and I'm growing. Failure, in my mind, is not a thing. It's not an option. It's an opportunity for me to learn. And I want to say this, you know, I do really encourage you all to go back and read Brené Brown's book and really get some of the insights from there. And not only that, I do want to add an extra bonus in. I didn't write this in my notes, but my favorite book by Brené Brown is actually The Gifts of Imperfection. And if you find yourself in a place where you struggle either to accept certain things about yourself, you're constantly looking to change yourself, and a few other things. If you just recognize your humanness and sometimes don't know how to accept that, I really encourage you to read The Gifts of Imperfection. It's hands down something I recommend you read once a year for your life. But as we wrap up, daring leadership isn't about having it all together. It's about courage. It's about clarity, and I believe it's about caring for people. It's about being willing to rumble with vulnerability, as Brené Brown says. It's about living into your values, and it's about rising strong after setbacks. And it's about refusing to function in dysfunction when you're called to grow. So I want to ask you today, where in your leadership do you need to dare a little bit more? Is it by being vulnerable? Is it by living more fully into your values, understanding what those values are? Or is it by rising after a fall? If today's episode resonated with you, here's how you can help keep the conversation going. Follow or subscribe to Arin It Out on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or YouTube. Rate and review the podcast. It helps more people find these conversations. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future episodes. Share this episode with a friend or a colleague who's been navigating a leadership challenge, and connect with me on LinkedIn or send me an email at hello@arinpatterson.com. I'd love to hear more about your leadership story. Next week, we're talking about follow the leader. Good leaders recognize the value of being good followers, under the right conditions, of course. We'll dive into what it means to follow well and why following is actually a key part of leading. Thanks again for listening to Arin It Out. I can't wait to see you next time. Have a great week.